There are no such thing as accidents. It seems to me that it's always the best course of action to choose to do what I believe is right, even if there are consequences for that. And yet, that philosophy can lead me into some pretty sticky situations because it leads you inevitably to question what is actually considered to be right. What rules that I'm following are worth risking my health, or my life, or my family's health. So I just got out of a screening of Jafar Panahi's new film, It Was Just an Accident, that got the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year. And suffice it to say that I was pretty blown away by it. It wasn't exactly what I expected, which I don't really know what I expected, but it came off so much quieter and so much more grounded than I guess what I'd expect to be the winner of the biggest film festival in the world. Anyway, there's just a few things that I want to say about the film. First off, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll just try to keep it, vague and just kind of generally what my thoughts were on the film so you can still watch this video and still watch the film and enjoy it. But there's just basically three things that I wanted to kind of highlight here. First is that the film feels real. And not only does it just feel grounded because of the cinematography, it's got this really rich 35 millimeter look that kind of just brings you into character, where it's very close up on our characters, where the camera movements are subtle, and it just feels real. But besides that, it taps into a culture that is so full of real and raw human beings that the film can't help but feel grounded in reality. Now, I haven't seen anything else from Panahi, but I understand that as a filmmaker, he's the leader of this documentary style of filmmaking that is mostly real and might verge into the fantasy. I think this might be one of his first films that's actually wholly based in a fictional story. He's clearly a director who's gone through his own fair share of actual real hardship living in the country that he lives in, and so this film absolutely taps into that. So that's another thing that makes it feel really real, is that that we're dealing with actual political problems, that we're dealing with things that real people actually do go through, and that's just tangibly felt throughout the film. The other thing that highlights that is that there's no score, there's no soundtrack in this movie. It's all just actual ambient noise. And so again, it's not meant to be dramatized. The film hardly ever feels dramatic, even when characters might be acting dramatically, because there aren't any sort of other elements that make the film feel less real. Again, it feels grounded. It feels like you're actually watching a real story take place in front of you. Panahi purposely chooses not to add any of those dramatic Hollywood devices that you might expect in a film, because that would take away from the actual real impact of the movie. The other thing that I noticed is just the elements of culture that are displayed here, like the fact that police officers and nurses and hospital workers are really corrupt and are asking for extra money here and there. And these things just happen, just behind the scenes. It's just part of how this culture actually is, which is a shock for me as a pampered American, being like, oh, this is just how these countries operate, and that's just a really sad thing. And that's another thing that the film highlights, is that these people are just living in this culture. They're just living in this environment and they're used to it. And it's kind of this like numb sensation, and multiple of the characters talk about this being people who used to be resistance fighters, or people who were standing up against this regime, is that they live like zombies. And so in that way, the story feels very visceral and like you're actually there with the characters. The second thing is more about the story itself and how gripping it is. Now, again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but basically just the synopsis that you'd see anywhere like on Letterboxd is that essentially you have this regular man who finds someone who he thinks is a high-level agent of a regime that they were fighting against, I guess, sort of in a past life. And if it's actually this man who ruined so many people's lives, he wants to kill him. And basically the entirety of the film is him and some other people trying to find out if it is actually the man that they think it is. So that story is kind of gripping in and of itself, because it's really, really well paced, where you don't really get any answers. Things are just kind of slowly revealed throughout the purpose of the story. There isn't any sort of unnecessary exposition to make you understand the story better. You're just in it with the characters, and there's sort of things that you are assumed to have already have known, because again, it's real, you're in the moment with them, and things kind of just become more apparent throughout. So it really isn't until the very end of the film that you actually get the full picture, and even then there are still questions that are unanswered, because it feels like a slice of life. It's a snapshot in reality, and because of that, the story is super gripping, because you're on these highs and lows, you're on this ride with the characters, and things are revealed slowly throughout it. And when things that are really important are revealed by the end, you're like, whoa, like you really feel the impact of that. Now, again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending is one of those really just sit in silence, like, wow moments, like where things kind of come full circle, but like not really full circle. It's like unsatisfying, but its unsatisfyingness is what gives you that dopamine hit that actually is satisfying. So it's just one of those movie things where it's like when it's a really smart sort of ending to something that doesn't really tie a bow on the story, but it's smart enough to give you that satisfaction, that I think is really, really well crafted storytelling. The final thing that I wanted to talk about is just the truth that lies in this movie, basically the philosophy of what's going on here. Because at the very beginning, there's a moment where a family's driving in a car and they hit a dog, and the little girl is really, really upset about this. And the mom keeps trying to comfort her and saying, it was just an accident. It was just an accident. But then what she says right after that is, perhaps God put that dog in our path for a reason. And that's what I think is really interesting, is that even in saying that, oh, this was just an accident, this was just chance, God might have actually made that happen. Essentially, the idea is that there really isn't any such thing as accidents, because there's all sorts of different things that happen throughout this story that are surprising to these characters that seem like just random strokes of chance. But in reality, these really might be just strokes of providence. See, the idea here is that nothing is really an accident, that things actually do happen for a reason. And I think that that's a fundamental truth. And that might be really sad and unfortunate for a lot of people. And we see this in this story. Characters where they're wondering themselves, why did I get put into this situation? Why am I here with these people? Why are we trying to figure this out? This is not where I want to be right now. I was living my normal life, but this is something that I stumbled upon. They have to ask themselves the question throughout the entirety of the film, is this an accident? Or is there a reason why I'm here? And what we find throughout the movie is that when certain things happen that make these characters question their decisions and why they're actually here, there's always something that's opposite. There's always a positive thing that comes about because of it that they wouldn't have been able to foresee. And so I come away from this film with a really interesting truth, which is that there isn't really any such thing as an accident. The situations that we find ourselves in that we think are just terrible and there's no way that they could be redeemed, oftentimes are actually for our salvation, are actually oftentimes really, really helpful for us as people. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the film. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I'm kind of torn between like a 4 out of 5 and a 4.5 out of 5, so I'd put it on the high end, like an 8.5 out of 10, like one of the higher 4-star movies that I've seen. Perhaps once I watch it again, it'll be rated higher. Really tightly crafted, feels real and grounded, and tells a fundamental truth. So in my mind, it's a really, really good movie. And now I'm really excited to go see the rest of what Jafar Panahi has because, I don't know, it's such an interesting style of storytelling that I haven't experienced before. I love watching foreign films because they give me a glimpse into a culture that I don't understand. And when I don't understand a movie, that kind of makes me like it a lot more. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Really excited about this filmmaker. I think that the movie definitely deserved the awards it's been given, at least as far as I know. I don't really follow that stuff very much, but I mean, it makes sense that it's highly awarded because it feels important, and it's also just an incredibly well-crafted, gripping story. And I mean, that's really all that you can ask out of a movie.